Decades after the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson was still harvesting asparagus from the beds he planted in his youth. In England, one rhubarb plant feeds a family for 150 years, passed on as a living inheritance through 6 generations. While neighbors replant tomatoes and peppers every year, you could be harvesting plants for which the change of seasons is just a formality. Modern agriculture teeters on the edge of the abyss, dependent on annual crops and chemical fertilizers. Climate change threatens to destroy traditional food production systems over the coming decades. But nature has some trump cards that we forgot to use. Perennial crops that survive any disaster. Plants that grow back without replanting. Gaining strength year after year instead of starting from scratch. Crops that reproduce themselves, spreading throughout the area and creating new colonies without your participation. The Spanish conquistadors tried to wipe out one forbidden grain forever, calling it the devil's food. These 10 forgotten crops could rewrite the future of food security for generations. Asparagus season has an almost magical power of resurrection. Emerald spears pierce the soil like nature's own story of resurrection, and Thomas Jefferson knew this magic like no one else. At Monticello, his carefully planned asparagus beds became the stuff of legend, producing tender shoots year after year. Jefferson's garden journals reveal his obsession with this superb vegetable, which he began growing as early as 1767. The ancient Romans were also obsessed with asparagus, so much so that they developed the first recorded methods of growing seedlings solely to extend the harvest season. Emperor Augustus even coined the phrase, "faster than cooking asparagus," to describe anything done with great speed. Even royalty could not wait for this delicacy. At Pompeii, archaeologists have discovered frescoes depicting bunches of asparagus, and Roman agricultural texts by Cato the Elder describe early greenhouse technology for year-round cultivation. Beneath your feet lies an underground empire that turns every asparagus plant into a living fortress. Each bush develops a root system that resembles an octopus of roots with thick, fleshy tentacles capable of reaching 2 meters deep. This living fortress accumulates enough energy to launch an offensive in the spring that will make any gardener jealous. The asparagus rhizome acts as a carbohydrate battery, recharged all summer long by the tall, fern-like foliage. Those airy green branches are solar collectors, pumping energy into the root system all season long. With the arrival of spring, the accumulated power explodes upward in a performance capable of producing from 25 to 30 shoots per rhizome. The fattest ones grow an astonishing 25 centimeters in one day. Plant physiology studies show cycles of carbohydrate storage and photosynthetic rates during fern growth stages, lending scientific authority to this visual story. The investment requires patience but pays off with royal dividends over 2 decades. Plant the first year, harvest lightly the third, then enjoy the bounty for the next 20 years without ever having to replant. Smart gardeners know that asparagus beds are like fine wine or vintage guitars. They improve with age, and every bite is worth its weight in gold and feels like a victory over time and labor. Economic comparisons show that a mature bed of asparagus yields up to 9 kilograms per 10 square meters annually. When store-bought asparagus costs about $10 a kilo, your plants will produce enough to feed the entire neighborhood. Jefferson's correspondence with European botanists and his importation of seeds from France show him as part of a global network of knowledge. He was not an isolated gardener, but a participant in the international exchange of agricultural wisdom that has survived the centuries. In the fog-shrouded forest sheds of Yorkshire, something amazing happens every winter. In complete darkness, rhubarb rhizomes awaken from hibernation and begin an ancient dance, pushing delicate pink stems towards the invisible sun with such force that farmers can literally hear them grow. The crackling and popping sound of expanding rhubarb has been nicknamed rhubarb music, and it has played the same tune for over 200 years. In 2010, this Yorkshire rhubarb received protected designation of origin status, elevating the segment from anecdotal to officially recognized agricultural heritage. For almost 5,000 years, rhubarb root was valued more than gold, traded across continents as a miracle cure. Marco Polo risked his life crossing the Silk Road partly to obtain rhubarb for European nobles who believed in its ability to cure everything from the plague to a broken heart. Traditional Chinese medical texts from the Han Dynasty prescribed finger rhubarb root as a laxative, adding cross-cultural depth to this healing story. The real magic happens in your backyard, where rhubarb rhizomes transform into living fortresses built to outlast empires. These massive, fleshy roots burrow deep into the ground, creating storehouses of supplies that laugh at Minnesota winters and Kansas heat waves. Once established, the rhubarb plant becomes almost immortal. There are documented cases of rhizomes that have produced crops for over a century, becoming family heirlooms passed down through generations as living bequests. The secret lies in rhubarb's split personality. Above ground, it is all Victorian elegance with massive elephant leaves creating dramatic focal points in ornamental gardens. Underground, it is a pure survival machine, storing enough energy to produce 20 to 30 harvestable stems each season. Plant it once in rich, well-drained soil, and you'll be harvesting tart pink stems for strawberry and rhubarb pies long after you've forgotten where it was planted. Here's a plant with an identity crisis that would make any Hollywood agent jealous. Despite its name, the Jerusalem artichoke is not from Jerusalem, is not an artichoke, and has fooled everyone from French explorers to modern nutritionists. For what it truly is, it may be the most wonderful perennial vegetable you've never grown. Ground pears are a North American crop that transforms sunlight into underground treasure with the efficiency of an alchemist. The real story begins 400 years ago, when French explorer Samuel de Champlain tasted these crunchy tubers in a Native American settlement. He declared them to be as good as artichokes, and the indigenous people called them sunroots. The Italians somehow mutilated it into girasol. Then the English mutilated it into Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the plant laughed all the way to the root cellar, spreading through the gardens faster than small-town gossip. What makes ground pears truly extraordinary is their botanical sleight of hand. Above ground, they camouflage themselves as cheerful sunflowers, growing 2 to 3 meters tall with bright yellow blossoms that feed pollinators all summer. But beneath the soil lies an entirely different world, where each plant quietly produces pounds of gnarled potato-like tubers. They taste like water chestnuts crossed with artichoke hearts and have a crunchy texture that lasts even after cooking. Unlike potatoes, ground pears store energy in the form of inulin rather than starch. This prebiotic fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria while barely registering on blood sugar monitors, making them a diabetic stream and a gardener's goldmine. Plant a handful of tubers in the spring, and by fall you'll be digging up enough earthen pears to fill a wheelbarrow. Leave a few in the ground, and next year's harvest will be even larger, demonstrating nature's self-replicating bounty. From tubers that hide their treasure underground, we move to a plant that wears its reproductive strategy like a badge of honor above the ground. Meet the Egyptian walking onion, a vegetable so independent that it literally strolls through your garden, planting itself wherever it pleases. The name is another geographic confusion that would confuse a navigation system. These bulbs are not Egyptian, they are actually from Europe, but somehow picked up their exotic nickname along trade routes. What they are is pure horticultural genius. Perennial onions that grow bulbs at the tops of their stems then use those bulbs as seeds, bending over like a green giraffe to plant the next generation within arm's reach. Imagine this remarkable process. In late summer, instead of flowers, onion shoots develop clusters of tiny bulbils at their tops. As these aerial bulbs become heavier, they bend the parent stem toward the ground like a loaded fishing rod. When the bulbs touch the soil, they instantly take root, creating new plants while remaining connected to the mother plant. It's nature's version of a cane, except the cane plants itself wherever it lands. This wandering behavior means your onion plot is literally expanding itself year after year. One clump planted today will march through your garden bed, planting colonies of baby bulbs like a Johnny Appleseed with character. Over the course of 3 years, you could have dozens of plants scattered within a 3-meter radius, all descended from your original starting set. Every part of the walking onion earns its place in the garden. The bulbs taste like mild onions, ideal for cooking. The green shoots provide a chives-like flavor all season long. Even puffed bulbs can be pickled like pearl onions or planted to expand your army of self-propagating vegetables, creating an endless cycle of edible abundance. In the hills of ancient Sicily, Roman emperors paid outrageous sums for a single artichoke. The price was so steep that only the richest patricians could afford what we now consider a simple garden product. These magnificent thistles were currency, medicine, and culinary treasure all wrapped up in one prickly package. Pliny the Elder wrote about their spread through Arab agricultural networks into Europe, providing a broader historical arc for this Mediterranean delicacy. Preserved frescoes from Pompeii depict bunches of artichokes next to other valuable goods, demonstrating their status among the Roman elite. Emperor Augustus even included artichokes in state banquets as a symbol of imperial power and sophistication. Fast forward to your backyard, where you can grow these same imperial delicacies with surprising ease. Ball artichokes are architectural marvels, towering perennials that transform any garden into a Mediterranean fantasy. Their silver-blue leaves spread out like giant arms, creating dramatic focal points that make neighbors stop mid-jog to stare. The real stars of the show are the flower buds themselves, those iconic scaly orbs that develop like softball-sized green roses. Each plant works like a generous ant, producing anywhere from 5 to 15 artichokes per season, depending on your climate and care. In mild winter zones, established plants can produce crops almost year-round, while colder regions enjoy impressive spring and fall harvests. The timing is perfect. Just when store-bought artichokes hit $1.50 each, your plants will produce enough to feed the entire neighborhood. Here's a secret that most gardeners miss. Artichokes are essentially edible flowers harvested before they bloom. Skip the harvest window, and these dense buds burst into purple thistles so impressive that florists pay premium prices for stems for cutting. When the Spanish conquistadors first encountered amaranth ceremonies in Aztec temples, they witnessed something that terrified them more than any weapon. The grain is so sacred that warriors mixed it with human blood to create edible statues of their gods. The Spanish reaction was swift and brutal. They banned the cultivation of amaranth completely, threatening death to anyone caught growing the devil's grain. In 1570, a Spanish colonial decree banned the cultivation of amaranth in central Mexico, and references from the Florentine Codex Bernardino de Sahagún documented Aztec rituals. Yet somehow this ancient superfood survived 500 years of suppression to emerge as one of the most nutritionally advanced crops on Earth. Amaranth earns its name from the Greek amaranthos, meaning never withers, and the plant lives up to its immortal reputation in impressive fashion. While other grains wither under drought, heat, or poor soil, amaranth thrives as if auditioning for a reality survival show. NASA seriously considered amaranth for space missions because of its exceptional nutrient density and ability to grow in challenging conditions that would kill wheat or rice. Research into a controlled environmental life support system has evaluated amaranth for space agriculture, adding credence to this interplanetary prospect. The plant itself is pure drama, towering stems that can reach 2.5 meters in height, topped with cascading panicles of tiny flowers. Colors range from deep burgundy to brilliant gold, creating a visual spectacle worthy of imperial gardens. But they're not just pretty faces. Each flower head produces thousands of seeds, so small they look like glitter. However, they contain more complete protein than almost any other plant source, all 9 essential amino acids in ideal proportions. Current FAO reports highlight amaranth's drought tolerance and yield stability under extreme conditions, reinforcing the narrative of its climate resilience. Iron levels make spinach look anemic in comparison to this ancient nutritional champion. Here's where amaranth gets really tricky. Technically, it's not a grain at all, but a pseudo-cereal that behaves like a grain while providing vegetable-level nutrition. The leaves are equally valuable. Harvest them young for mild spinach-flavored salads. or let them ripen for cooking greens, which surpass kale in mineral content. It's like getting two completely different vegetables from the same plant, each with its own unique culinary uses and nutritional profile. Plant amaranth once, and you'll likely never have to replant it again. Seeds fall naturally, creating volunteer crops that come back year after year with zero effort on your part. It is a self-perpetuating food system that becomes more productive with each generation. While modern farmers struggle with soil depletion and chemical dependency, your amaranth is quietly proving that ancient wisdom outperforms industrial agriculture in the long run. Where amaranth reaches toward the skies with colorful panicles, our next perennial crop prefers to keep its most valuable assets buried deep in the dark. There's a reason horseradish has survived in gardens for over 3,000 years without a single breeding program, pesticide treatment, or horticultural manual. This plant is basically indestructible, and ancient civilizations knew this. The Egyptians fed it to pyramid-building slaves for strength. The Greeks used it as medicine, and medieval Europeans discovered that a tiny scratch of the fresh root could preserve meat through entire winters. When you plant a single horseradish root, you are essentially signing a lifetime contract with one of nature's most persistent tenants. This is not a hyperbole. Horseradish roots sink deep into the soil like living jackhammers, sometimes reaching 2.5 meters down in loose soils if left undisturbed. They create a taproot system so strong that it can break through the hard clay soil that defeats most other plants. Break off even a tiny piece at harvest time, and that fragment will sprout into a full-fledged plant by next spring. The secret lies in those thick white roots that look deceptively innocent until you grate them fresh. That's when horseradish releases its secret weapon, allyl isothiocyanate, the same compound that causes wasabi to burn. But where wasabi costs $200 a kilo and loses potency within 15 minutes, horseradish provides the same sinus-cleansing fire for pennies. It retains its punch for months when stored in vinegar, demonstrating a practical durability that puts its Japanese cousin to shame. Smart gardeners treat horseradish like buried treasure, literally. The roots improve with age, developing more complex heat and flavor as they mature. 5-year-old horseradish root can pack enough power to clear the sinuses of 3 neighboring counties, providing medicinal compounds. Traditional healers have used them for centuries for everything from respiratory ailments to digestive problems. What if your salad greens could outlive your mortgage? Sorrel turns any garden corner into a Tart treasure trove that returns year after year, asking for nothing more than to provide exquisite flavor with the reliability of a sunrise. This hardy perennial unfurls broad, arrow-shaped leaves that shimmer with an almost metallic green sheen. Their surfaces are smooth as silk, but strong enough to withstand frost, drought, and neglect with enviable dignity. French chefs have treasured sorrel for centuries, calling it osy and incorporating it into classic dishes such as sorrel soup and fish sauces. Medieval monks grew it in monastery gardens not only for its characteristic lemon flavor, but also for its reputation as a blood purifier and digestive aid. The plant's name comes from the Old French sorrel, meaning sour, a testament to its signature tart kick that can make your mouth purse in delight. The unique content of oxalic acid creates that characteristic sour taste that intensifies as the leaves mature. Unlike annual greens that require replanting, sorrel establishes deep taproots that anchor it for decades. It sends out fresh harvests from early spring to late fall, making each season a continuous celebration of tartness. Modern farm-to-table restaurants value sorrel for its bright acidity that cuts through rich dishes. Home gardeners find it virtually indestructible once established, able to thrive in conditions that would make other greens give up. When the leaves are young, they emerge tender and vibrant, ideal for fresh eating in salads that awaken the taste buds with their lemony tang. As the leaves mature, they develop a deeper, more robust astringency that transforms soups and sauces into culinary masterpieces. Sorrel contains significant levels of oxalic acid, explaining both its taste and dietary considerations for those prone to kidney stones. But for most gardeners, It is simply a natural acidifier that never fails and never needs to be replaced. Forget everything you know about cabbage's short life cycle. These are not your store-bought greens that bolt after one season, but the perennial kale that stands steadfast in gardens for years, its thick, woody stems branching upward like a miniature tree. These wonderful plants develop into bush-like structures, reaching up to 1.25 meters in height. The sturdy branches are adorned with deeply lobed leaves that are blue-green to purple-colored depending on the cold. Portuguese sailors carried these hardy varieties across the oceans centuries ago, relying on their incredible keeping quality and resistance to scurvy during long voyages. In the Azores and coastal Europe, the perennial kale still grows wild along the cliffs, its deep roots anchoring it against salt spray and fierce Atlantic winds. Unlike their annual counterparts, the leaves of perennial cabbage grow thicker and more significantly. They have a texture that holds up well when cooked, maintaining a sweet, nutty flavor that becomes more complex with each passing season. What makes perennial cabbage stand out is its ability to continuously regenerate without a single transplant. Harvest the outer leaves and the plant simply produces more, transforming from a single crown into a multi-branched powerhouse capable of feeding a family year-round. Its cold hardiness borders on the uncanny, with the leaves actually becoming sweeter after frost kisses them. Modern homesteaders value these varieties for their independence, requiring minimal care once established, while providing constant nutrition through seasons when other vegetables fail. British naval records document cabbage as an anti-scorbutic crop, strengthening the narrative of the survival of this maritime superfood. Sailors knew that a handful of cabbage leaves could mean the difference between life and death during month-long ocean passages. Plants reproduce through cuttings rather than seeds, which adds specificity to their reproductive biology. Simply cut a branch, stick it into moist soil, and within a few weeks you'll have a new plant, genetically identical to its parent, ready to begin its own decade of productivity. In ancient China, daylilies were not grown in flower beds. They were cultivated in vegetable gardens, valued as golden needles, and considered indispensable ingredients for imperial cuisine. For centuries before Europeans discovered these hardy flowers, Chinese chefs included every part of the plant in their dishes, from tender shoots in spring stir-fries to dried buds that added a nutty sweetness to winter soups. Ancient Chinese agricultural texts, such as the Ximing Yao Shu, mention daylilies as a dual-use crop, ornamental and edible. Here's something modern gardeners are just rediscovering. Daylilies are essentially perennial vegetables disguised as ornamental flowers. Each plant produces dozens of buds during the growing season, and each one is edible, crisp raw in salads, stuffed like miniature squash blossoms, or sautéed until it tastes like sweet green beans with floral notes that would make a chef cry. But daylilies don't stop at flowers. The young shoots that emerge in the spring taste strikingly similar to asparagus. The tuberous roots can be harvested like small sweet potatoes, and the flower petals, after blooming and wilting, can be dried and stored as a natural food coloring. It turns ordinary dishes into Instagram-worthy masterpieces without a single chemical additive. What makes daylilies truly remarkable is their relentless productivity without the capriciousness of most edible flowers. Unlike their namesake lilies, which bloom briefly and disappear, daylilies continue to produce buds from early summer until frost in the fall. A mature clump can produce over 200 buds in one season, providing enough edible flowers to supply a small restaurant. All this from a plant that requires less care than most houseplants and reproduces like botanical bunnies. The plants double in size every few years until you have enough divisions to line entire paths. They tolerate everything from hot sun to deep shade, drought to flooding, and soil so poor that weeds struggle to survive within its confines. These 10 perennial crops prove that the old adage, "work smarter, not harder," has never been more true. In a world facing climate change and food insecurity, plants like Jefferson's asparagus, Aztec amaranth, and rhubarb, passed down through generations, are more than just curiosities. These are survival tools, proven through centuries of unpredictable weather conditions and human upheaval. Consider what we've uncovered: bulbs that plant themselves, horseradish roots that thrive under neglect, and daylilies that turn a flower bed into a self-sustaining pantry. Together, they form the basis of a true survival garden designed to stand the test of time when annual crops fail. Modern permaculture principles, developed by figures such as Bill Mollison, connect historical wisdom with modern sustainability movements. Earth Institute research on perennial polycultures demonstrates up to a 90% reduction in soil erosion compared to annual cropping systems. This grounds the concept in modern climate science, proving that ancient strategies offer modern solutions. Remember, the best time to plant a perennial was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Start now, and your future self or even your grandchildren will inherit food security rooted in resilience. As the fragile systems of modern agriculture teeter on the brink of collapse, these forgotten crops offer an alternative. They turn every backyard into a fortress against uncertainty, every garden into an inheritance that feeds generations without a single replanting. Choosing a plant that will outlive you is an act of faith in the future, and an acknowledgement that the best investments are measured not in months, but in decades. When you plant a rhubarb root or an asparagus rhizome, you are participating in a chain of human wisdom that stretches from the Egyptian pyramids to NASA's space programs. Which of these crops would you plant first? Already harvesting from one or more of them? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to continue exploring nature's most unusual responses to survival.